Welcome back to our Tuesday afternoon Bible study here, and we're in Mark chapter 14 now, just nearing the end of this book, and some of these are maybe very familiar, some of them maybe not as familiar, but sometimes maybe a little bit of a challenge to work our way through. But I want to focus on maybe a couple of things here today in the first part of Mark chapter 14, and the story is pretty familiar to us. Jesus has come there, basically has come to Jerusalem, but then very possibly was out in the surrounding area. Of course, we know Bethany being the home of Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha. And it seems as though Mary was the one that comes into play here in this particular story here. Some may question it's just a who all, but from what we can tell, I think it's John 12 also refers to her as Mary. It seems like very obviously must be the same story. And so it seems as though, I think the general idea, the general consensus is that this is referring to Lazarus' sister, Mary. And yet I want to also notice something, maybe a couple of things. We could maybe deal with the issue of a name. Sometimes people have a name to be something when they are not. And a couple that I want to mention to you, or several maybe even here. First of all, you have the chief priests and the scribes. And what would their name be? Well, probably religious, godly, the church leaders. You think that these were surely, they would have a name to be worthy of following. And yet, right away here, in the midst of, again, a name that they're supposed to be religious, and they're saying, oh, we want to kill this man, but we don't want to do it on the feast day. We don't want the people to be upset. This is a religious holiday. We have to make sure we keep the religious holiday. But as soon as that's over with, we're going to go ahead and kill this man. And it's like, this doesn't even add up. How can you be debating as to what day to do it on when you're dealing with a deed like killing Jesus, the Son of God? And so they had a name that they were religious and were far from it. Well, religious, maybe I'll put it that way. They were religious, but they weren't godly. And then the next one that I found interesting sometimes, and maybe could be, I don't know, maybe even sort of a comfort to some of you that would watch this. But notice that it says here in verse 3, and being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper. They were at Simon's house. Simon had been a leper. And yet, even after Jesus had healed him, and he had been healed, but even after Jesus had healed him, he's still known as being Simon the leper. And sometimes it's tragic, I guess, in some ways, that we can't always seem to live down the name we've made for ourselves. Maybe we've been totally changed, totally different, and God has transformed our lives, and yet people still may remember us. Oh, yeah, they did that. They did that. But in this case, Simon had been a leper, and nobody should have been around him. He should have been maybe off by himself. Again, now we're talking about before his healing. But Jesus comes here and basically says, Simon, that may have been what you used to be, but sorry about the name. You're not what the name suggests anymore. You are not the leper anymore. I'm here to share with you. And of course, there were a number of others as well. Obviously, Jesus, he would touch the leper. He would be around those who were sick and afflicted, and apparently he was not affected by that. But anyway, here, just maybe, I don't know if that would be a help to someone or not, but maybe it's something that occurred to me. We still call him Simon the leper, even though that's his past life. That's what he used to be after or before Jesus touched him. And afterward, he was totally different. He was a changed man in the sense that he was no longer a leper, even though he still had to go by that name. And then we go back to the bad part of the story, you might say, and there are others who have indignation about this ointment being supposedly wasted. Maybe we could talk about that name for just a moment. Because waste is, it may be a subjective term a little bit. Maybe it depends on who's asking or who's talking about it. The disciples here, and apparently it's Judas. Again, go back to John 12 and you can see that. that Judas seems to be all upset about the waste of the value of the money, at least, what would have been valued as money in this ointment. And so he's saying, well, it could have been sold for more than 300 pence. 300 days' wages, I mean, almost a year's salary, and here she is wasting it. But was it wasted? There again, the name is not quite accurate. On the negative side, the name's not quite accurate for Judas because he couldn't have been much of a disciple of Jesus. Yeah, he was going around as a disciple, and he was called a disciple, but he wasn't much of a disciple. That's the negative side. But then also this issue of waste. He blamed her for wasting this, when in reality it was such a huge investment that was given to the Son of God. And so much so that later on here, Jesus said, wheresoever, this is verse 9, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of for a memorial for her, or of her. And so Jesus certainly didn't see it as a waste, even though Judas, maybe even some of the other disciples, and probably I would be likely to say the chief priests and scribes that were mentioned there in verse 1 would have also agreed with that. But it certainly was not a waste. And could I just maybe remind us today in this little time of Bible study together that anything we do for God from our hearts, really truly trying to serve God and please Him and do whatever He wants us to do, anything we give to Him is not a waste. Oh, there may be other people that say, oh, look at how they wasted their life, or look how they wasted their resources, or whatever, a whole variety of things I suppose they could try to throw in our faces. If we simply try to please God with everything in us, some people may say it was a waste. But God will never say that. God never sees it that way. But instead, anything we give to Him is valuable, and it's an investment for eternity. And so, there again, the name, wasted? No, it doesn't fit it. But then also even the disciple in Judas, as I mentioned to her, or to you as well, Jesus also goes a little further, and I just want to remind you of that. Maybe we'll try to bring it to a close here. But Jesus saw what Judas called a waste, and He said, you let her alone. And once in a while, we maybe could just take that to heart as well and recognize that where we might say, again, we might call things, I don't know if you'd want to say wasted, but at least sometimes maybe inappropriate, or I don't think that's right. I don't think they ought to be doing that, or whatever else. But sometimes maybe Jesus would just, if He could just get through to us, He might say, you better let that alone. It's not up to you to say whether that was right or not. And when somebody's doing it for God, we need to kind of back off a little bit and say, Lord, it may not be my choice on the way this was handled. Maybe I don't agree with everything. Maybe I would have even been like the disciples or Judas saying, well, we should be better stewards. But sometimes we can get a little too caught up in what we think is the name. I'll go back to that in a moment. The name stewardship. But in reality, it's stinginess. And God help us that we let some situations alone and let people try to mind God as best they know how without finding fault and trying to stir up trouble. So anyway, in just a little bit here, you see, again, even Judas, another example here. When this lady had really given her all, Judas, just following this, he sold out. But not for God, he sold out for the devil, and soon was bringing about the betrayal and eventual crucifixion of Jesus. Of course, that was God's plan. So I'm not excusing Judas, but I am saying God knew all about this. He was in charge still. But right here, we see that Judas is leading the way right into the next few verses here, the Last Supper, and Jesus just preparing to make His way to the cross. But I guess maybe it's been a little scattered today. But just thinking about that with the name, sometimes what we call something, whether it's religious, whether it's a leper or some other past misdeed for us, maybe certainly different than leprosy, but in a spiritual line, it would be maybe something like that. And then maybe we call it sometimes wasted, or maybe we say it was bad stewardship, but God can hopefully help us to maybe get our eyes open sometimes and see things the way they really are. Not just what they're called, not just by the name, but by the way He really truly sees it. Well, God bless you even this week, and hopefully I can get back to this. I know we're just about to the end, and I've taken so long in the last little while. Been busy through the summer and all, but hopefully we can finish up the book of Mark here just shortly, maybe in the next few weeks or so, and hopefully it's been a help to you. Again, keep seeking after God, doing what He'd want you to do, and never consider what you do for Him to be wasted.